Hello, everybody, and welcome. I know this is the Thursday, and it's not a challenge run, but it was a challenge to go ahead and edit all this. But this is what I've been working on for basically months, every single day, or at the very least Monday through Friday, doing an under 60-second review of every single Pokemon. Eventually, we've already started going into Gen 2. Those are going to be uploaded within the next day or two. But this is just all of those put together. This way, if you missed shorts or if you just want to binge watch all of them at once, here you go. Hope you enjoy. Like and subscribe for more. Bulbasaur. If you've seen this channel before, you know I'm a Bulbasaur fan. He's a dino-looking little guy, and he also kind of reminds me of Cell from Dragon Ball Z with all his little speckles. However, even with all those positives in his favor, I can't give him above A for this tier list. Is this tier list completely made up in terms? Yes. What am I basing it off of? Nuzlocke experience and design. Am I biased? Yes. Is that gonna show? Also yes. But here's the thing. Grass types, while a great support, is too weak against too many types to be a frontrunner, and add poison typing into that, you have just more weaknesses. Ultimately, both types has far too many weaknesses in the gen that they're presented with, but it's okay, little guy, because guess what? I still love you and think you deserve the A tier. And you're still good at killing fairies. Ivysaur. What if I told you that we're going to take that cute little dinosaur, make the bulb on his back start to bloom, and make him Angie? Well, that's what we're doing here, and with Ivysaur, honestly, it's okay. Unfortunately, with a lot of the 3-stage evolutions, especially for starters, they enter this awkward teenage years phase. Granted, the stats do go up, which is always a plus, but the typing, as said with Bulbasaur, does leave something to be desired. By the time you get to Ivysaur, it's just in time to fight Misty if you're playing by hardcore Nuzlocke rules, and that's probably one of the last times he'll get to shine. But even with all his problems, I'm still gonna give him a solid C tier ranking. Keep going on, little dinosaur man, and stay Angie. Venusaur. The flower is definitely in bloom, and boy is he a big heckin' chonker. We go from a very much dinosaur-looking little guy to frog-looking with its final evolution, aside from the giant terrarium growing on its back. Venusaur's design isn't bad, and of course the stat gains is nice. He's a decent wall given his thick defense, and he's able to set up whatever status condition you could dream of. While he doesn't get much late use in the game, he's still good. As long as he can take some hits, he should be able to set up a pretty good stall battle. Overall, I'd say giving the boy a B tier is pretty good, especially after what they did to him in Pokemon Stadium. Nightmares. Charmander. If you've been here before, you know I'm not a fan of the Charizard evolution. But not from a design perspective. Honestly, it's simply due to the overhype. So keeping the bias out of this, Charmander is an adorable little monster due to the flame on its tail. Honestly, great choice for Ash to actually save this thing, because overall, it is a solid fire Pokemon, and more often than not, in some games it's worse than others, but fire Pokemon are very difficult to come by. Not only that, but with the Fire Red Leaf Green moveset, he gets access to the move Metal Claw, which is actually pretty solid. So, for Charmander, I am going to go ahead and give him the A tier. Charmeleon. Once again, immediately, we are in the awkward teenage years. Now, if someone could explain to me why he goes from orange to this awkward red color, get the horn on the back of its head, it's not a great design. The good news is, by the time you get Charmeleon, if you're using Nuzlocke rules, you're almost in the clear with gym leaders, and after this particular hurdle with Misty, you're at least no longer weak to them for a while. The stat gains are nice, the move pool is solid, but honestly, it's just that design. If I were a cruel man, I'd put him into D tier, but for the stat gains and the move pool alone, we'll go ahead and put it in C tier, but you are skating on thin ice. Charizard, the final stage evolution of Charmander, and one that, again, I'm not a fan of simply just due to the overhype for years on end. However, from a design perspective, it's great, and I'm glad that we went back to the orange that we started with. Oh, and also, it's a motherfucking dragon. though somehow still not by type. The design on this Pokemon is absolutely stellar. The added flying type gives it some great movesets and a little bit more coverage. It does add a 4 times weakness to Rock, which isn't great, but by now you're also in the back half of the game where Giovanni is basically your only true fear. As much as I hate to say it, due to the fact that you can go toe-to-toe with any gym leader and the design choice, I am going to give the overrated Fire Lizard an S tier. Squirtle. And now, we're moving on to the last of the starters, but we're going to be covering every single Pokemon, and so we still have about 1,000 that we need to go through. This was actually my go-to starter as a kid. He's a little turtle, he's got a floofy tail, and he sprays water. From a Nuzlocke perspective, he goes well against Brock, the multiple Giovanni fights, Blaine, a few of Bruno's Pokemon, and also Lance because he can learn Ice Beam. I did a solo challenge on my page with only a Squirtle, actually all 3 starters, and Squirtle cleared the game lower than the rest due to the fact that he can learn Ice Beam. He didn't struggle against Lance nearly as much as any of them did. Stats are normal for a starter, so overall, I'm gonna confidently place this boy into the A tier. Wartortle. And here we are once again with the awkward teenage years, but I'll be honest, and in my opinion, this is one that actually feels like it makes sense. Most middle stage evolutions are an awkward middle stage, and while this is technically no different, I feel like it makes sense to the full evolution line. Better stats, better moveset. While the evolution isn't necessarily a better design, it's still solid. Unfortunately, about the time that you get him, you're running into people like Surge and Erica, so he doesn't get to see too much mid-game use, and for that, I'm still gonna go ahead and give him an 8. Blastoise, the biggest of the bunch, and one that I desperately wish would have been given an updated Steel typing as the generations moved on. From a moves perspective, he's great. Really, the middle of the game around Erica is his only struggle point, and after that, he can go head-to-head, sometimes with advantage with a lot of the back half of the game. Giovanni, Blaine, Bruno, Lance because he can learn Ice Beam. He's got awesome cannons, and overall, turtles are pretty cool too. So, with all that being said, we're gonna go ahead and give him an S tier. Caterpie. So, I won't lie. At first, I was very tempted to just lump the bugs together, but that wouldn't do either of them justice. Now, unfortunately, Caterpie is kind of awful in terms of trying to survive in a Nuzlocke. Bug types do evolve early if they can survive that long, but his only attacking move is Tackle, and his other move as a whole is String Shot, which lowers an opponent's speed. It's an overall cute design. It's basically what most first stage evolutions are. Due to everything going against it, I am still going to go ahead and place it into the C tier. Metapod. Like the caterpillar to a butterfly, we enter the middle stage, which is the cocoon phase. If found in the wild, more often than not, the only move that it's going to have is Harden. If you were lucky enough to have a Caterpie that made it here, it'll have the moves it learned in the previous evolution. Overall, this isn't a very special design for obvious reasons, and the move pool's lackluster, giving it a pretty horrid chance for a Nuzlocke. Overall, this one is getting a D tier for me. Butterfree. Now we're moving on to the final evolution, and I've gotta say it's absolutely gorgeous. From the pink Butterfree in the anime, to its regular shiny form, and even its regular form actually looks pretty incredible. It's got access to a flurry of moves, mostly status powders, but also a very early psychic move in Confusion, which is nothing to sneeze at. The only downside of these particular bugs is that they lose their usefulness pretty early on into a run. However, if you can still attack first and have the ability Compact Eyes, you are more than likely going to be getting your opponent to sleep and hopefully get a safe switch. And for that, Butterfree is going to go ahead and earn itself a B. Weedle. Weedle is definitely the fiercer of the two, and has the added benefit of having a slightly better move in Poison Sting than in Caterpie's Tackle. With Poison Sting having the ability to poison, it's useful, but the main problem in it is that Brock carries healing items, so if you nab this in Viridian Forest, you're still gonna end up struggling. And in the new gen, he has rock moves, which is definitely gonna take it out if you didn't bother to evolve. Weedle doesn't really get much of a chance to shine, but Poison can be useful when it comes to slugfests, especially in the beginning when moves are very weak. Due to that, just like Caterpie, it's going to land itself in the C tier. Kakuna. With Kakuna, we're actually running into the same issue that we did with Metapod. Lack of move variety, somewhat boring design, the fact that it's just a Cocoon Pokemon, but it is one of those things that you need the Cocoon Pokemon for it to make sense. But again, if you end up catching it in the forest, once again, the only move that it's going to have is Harden. Due to this, it wouldn't be fair to place him any higher than Metapod, so Kakuna is going to join Metapod in the D tier. Beedrill. Now this guy is nasty looking, but in the best possible way. Beedrill has a halfway decent attack stat for a Moke Pokemon, and given the fact that he can learn moves like Swords Dance and Twin Needle, he's actually a force to be reckoned with if he has the type advantage. Problem is, more often than not, that's not going to be the case, but the good news is, he can learn Twin Needle before fighting Misty, and against her Water Pulsing Starmie, it's actually a pretty much needed advantage depending on the starter that you captured. Due to that, even though he has some hard fall off afterwards, like most bugs, we're still going to go ahead and put him into the B tier. Pidgey, the regional bird, but not just any regional bird, the first regional bird. Overall, it's an alright design, but some of the regional birds are far better. The stats are abysmal, the moveset is not great, but the TMs it can learn, also not great. Sand attack strats are better than nothing, but still not the best. If this is your main encounter, good luck. He'll be good against Erica, assuming you live that long. So for today, Pidgey, you are gonna get the D tier. Pidgeotto. The bird is a bit bigger, a bigger hairdo, and bigger everything. Pidgeotto is far better than Pidgey with nearly a 100-point jump in BST. The anime definitely did a good job in giving Ash a Pidgeotto to make sure that this guy wasn't forgotten, because we would go on to receive so many multi-form regional birds. Overall, due to the stat jump, the design choice, I feel pretty confident putting him in the C tier. Pidgeot. Another 100 points and a base stat jump. The hair is even longer, giving Pidgeot a Billy Ray Cyrus achy breaky bird look. Unfortunately, if you're going by Nuzlocke rules, you're not getting this fully evolved Pokemon until past Erica's gym. And it's a shame, because that gym could have been a good time for them to shine, but from here, there isn't much it's strong against. At the end of the day, while the design is great, the BST is good, we're gonna go ahead and put him firmly into the B tier. Rattata. Rattata's a field mouse, and a fairly weak one at that. But there is one thing that makes this Pokemon better than it has any business being. Guts. Guts is an ability that as long as you have a status condition inflicted upon you, your attack raises 50%. Pair that with Hyper Fang, and you've got a fast Pokemon and a hard hitter on top of that. So, if you're going into battle and you need Rattata, poison it, burn it, do what you gotta do, send it into battle, and because of that, go ahead and take this C tier with you. Raticate. Now, you may not know this unless you know me, but I am horrified of rats IRL. Long story, if you want to hear more, drop a comment below. But anyway, nearly a 200-point jump in BST with access to moves like Bite as well. It's not a bad Pokemon overall. While there isn't much use to them once you get to the late game, Dark-type moves, strong normal-type, Guts, and a good stat jump are all positives for that. I'm just not super crazy on the design. He'll still get a B tier, but just barely. Spearow. Now, this is a Pokemon that if it weren't for the anime, would have likely been forgotten. It's a simple 2-form bird Pokemon, and I'll be honest, I wish this Pokemon had more popularity. I love the color of the feathers, and from a design perspective, it's definitely the better of the two. The moveset is meh, the base stat also meh, and the usefulness of it also meh. But it does have its time to shine, at least in Erica's gym, unlike Pidgeot, and because of that, we're going to go ahead and give it a C tier. Fearow. And this Pokemon is a bit meh. The base stat total jump is nice, but honestly, there isn't much of a difference in anything else. The moveset is about the same. From a design perspective, I also think that he's worse than Spearow, and it just seems kind of boring. Overall, I feel like they could have given him more, but since he was the bad bird, I feel like they purposefully just tried to make him bad. So because of that, you should go ahead and fly off to where you belong in the sea. Ekans, or rather, Snake, spelled backwards. Everyone has a little bit of a soft spot for this guy, along with his evolution, mostly due to the amount of time that it's spent in the anime. He looks like a rattler, and can carry one of the best abilities in the game, Intimidate, something that cuts your opponent's attack down. It learns a decent set of moves with normal, poison, dark, and a decent slew of TMs. Its only downside is that it's a rather simple design, but even with all of that, and for nostalgia purpose, we're going to go ahead and place it into the beat. Arbok, or Cobra spelled backwards. Overall, they did a phenomenal job with the design on this particular Pokemon. You see the head first, and then immediately you're caught off guard by this striking design across the chest. Overall, the design, as I've said, is fantastic. The moveset is fine, and again, Intimidate is just a fantastic ability. Given all of that, it's not great when you get towards the late game, given its base stat. However, Intimidate is going to be good no matter you're level 5 or 500, so due to all that, we're going to go ahead and place it into the 8. Pikachu, the Pokemon mascot, and a very fun design. While it's permanently covered by plot armor in the anime, like Brock's gym, Blaine's gym, and pretty much any battle that it could possibly go in a Nuzlocke or a solo challenge, it's not great. You can find it in Viridian Forest, and while that'll be great for Misty, that's about it. Thankfully, it does have some cuteness, and due to the anime, a lot of personality. Due to the design and just a fun Pokemon that it can be, I am going to go ahead and place it into the B tier, but that's just barely. Raichu, the overlooked big brother of Pikachu, at least till we got to the Alola region. The design isn't great in my opinion, and due to us not getting a way to evolve Pikachu until Celadon, it won't be super useful until we go up against Lorelei. Sadly, this little guy doesn't have a lot going on for him, and overall, we don't even get to see him too much in the anime once we get past Surge. Like, that was his moment to shine. And unfortunately, because of all this going against him, we are going to go ahead and place him into the C tier. Nidoran Female. This was an interesting concept for a very early game to have both male and female available. While I don't enjoy the shiny form as much, given what they do in the final stage of the evolution, the original design is pretty cool. It's a pretty weak Pokemon, but a surprisingly massive move pool. Normally, normal-type Pokemons are the ones with such a wide variety, so it's kind of fun to see a Poison-type actually getting so much extra attention. This allows it to be versatile, if it survives. Due to this, we'll go ahead and place it into the C tier. Nidorina, the middle stage evolution and the true definition of teenage years. This is a good in-between Pokemon with better stats. The one thing I will say that I didn't touch on in the prior review is that Poison Point is such a great ability to have. I would never hope for rivalry, given how ineffective it can actually be, but at the end of the day, this design is still the middle stage comparison, so due to that, it's also going to land itself into the C tier. Nidoqueen. And what else can I say aside from Slay Queen? I actually really like the body armor aspect of this design, and from a stats and move pool perspective, it's a very solid Pokemon, and the good news is, if you don't care too much about movesets, you can have one by the time you get to Misty. While it won't necessarily help with her, it will help with Lieutenant Surge, and it's a pretty strong Pokemon going forward. So with all that in mind, we're gonna go ahead and place the Queen into the A tier. I still hate the shiny design. Nidoran Male. Again, pretty cool concept for such an early game, but still, it's such an overall striking design. There isn't much to say for the male. that wasn't said about the female. I don't like the shiny form for the final evolution, base stat isn't great, however, the ability Poison Point is on point.
This guy stinks!
So with all that in mind, we're gonna go ahead and put it beside the female into the C tier. Nidorino. With this one, I'll be honest, I actually prefer it over the female version. I think it doesn't look as awkward and very nicely prepares you for Nidoking. It has that angsty teenager look that MCR would be proud to be able to sing about. The base stat total is almost identical to its female counterpart. Since the design is a little bit better than the female version, I feel pretty comfortable giving this a B. Nidoking, and oh my Arceus, this thing is intense. It's got a nasty design, a nasty moveset, and most people use this absolute kaiju monster in speedruns. The base stat is great, the typing is great, and finally, the shiny is horrible. I honestly do not enjoy the color swap between the two when they could have made them truly unique, but at the end of the day, I can't hold that against him, and he's gonna go ahead and hop into the S tier due to all the positives in his favor. Clefairy. 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 From the sing-song tune to the anime to the Pokemon Stadium minigame, this is definitely a Pokemon that people will remember, and it was also at one point considered to be the mascot for the game. The stats aren't great, but the moveset more than makes up for it on things, and if one thing can be said, this Pokemon has a personality, and also, giving this a fairy type in later generations definitely made sense and increased its usefulness, so due to all of this, we're going to go ahead and actually put Clefairy into the B tier. Clefable. Now this one is interesting because while it's an evolution of Clefairy, it comes with its own creepypasta Gengar horror story. The stats do a drastic leap from Clefairy, but overall, I do feel like this Pokemon is at least a little less popular, whether it's because of how popular or well-known Clefairy is, or just because of the design. I don't think it's necessarily worse. Due to that, we're actually going to go ahead and put Clefable into the B tier, but maybe a little bit lower than Clefairy. Jigglypuff, S tier. Just kidding. Honestly, I hope Baby Rhino watches these from our Pokemon by Daylight series, because I always fight for this Pokemon to be on somebody's team. Maybe to mess with him? I don't know. Anyway, this cute little goober also received a Super Saiyan power boost by being given the fairy type. While every stat is basically abysmal, it does have a pretty big HP pool, and too many TMs to even list. Just don't fall asleep or it's gonna draw a B tier right on your face. Wigglytuff, the overshadowed evolution of Jigglypuff, and one that doesn't have any type of creepypasta to help give it more popularity. Thankfully, it does get a base stat total boost, as Pokemon do tend to get, and the move pool is still massive. The B tier is still a good place to put it as well, because it doesn't matter what gym leader it goes against, given the fact that it can learn so many different moves, and just another reason why I love normal types. Or fairy, I guess, kinda, it doesn't matter. Vulpix. Once again, we're getting into a Pokemon that is widely popularized due to the anime. It's a very cute Pokemon, and one that I absolutely adore. I'm not a fan of Flashfire for an ability, and the stats are pretty subpar if we're being honest. The moveset is an interesting one, with moves like Confuse Ray, Will-O-Wisp, Attract, etc., so overall, I feel like Vulpix would fit comfortably into the B tier. Ninetales. This Pokemon is absolutely gorgeous in design, and I love the lore behind it. The stats jump up a little over 200 points, and that's nothing to sneeze at by any means. The Pokemon is wonderful, and it just seems like an anime Pokemon. Most likely due to the fact of the nine-tailed fox theme, but overall, I think that A tier is a perfect place for it. Oddish. Now, this one is kind of odd-ish. From a stats perspective, a level perspective, and even a TM perspective, it's kind of bad overall. It's got a cute little design, but that's really about all it has going for it, and due to that, we're gonna have it join the Cocoon Pokemon in the D tier. Gloom. This particular Pokemon, I don't know, I think it's just kind of gross overall. I respect the fact that it got some time to shine in the anime, but it didn't really need or frankly deserve it. From what I pray to Arceus' drool on its face, to the not-so-great stat gains, to the cursed imagery that Pokemon Stadium gave us for its attacking phase, just like Brock, it should keep its eyes closed so it can't see how quickly we put it into the D tier. Vileplume, and now we finally have some passable stats, and by that, I mean we have a decent special attack and special defense while everything else remains lackluster. The design is far better for this one, and it is based off a real-life plant. They retracted on the ick factor of this particular Pokemon, but unfortunately by the time that you get this, it won't be much use aside from Giovanni, maybe. You could probably use it against Lorelei if she doesn't use too many ice moves, but due to that, we're gonna go ahead and put it into the C. Paris, and I don't mean the city. Paris is, well, kinda also terrible. In Gen 1, this guy was nearly unusable given its plethora of weaknesses, and while it isn't much better now, it's at least seen some success. It can learn a few surprising TMs like Aerial Ace, but the problem that you have with Paris is that it's unlikely to be able to survive any kind of attack thrown at it. Poor stats all around are gonna land this little guy into the D tier, and I actually feel really bad for it. Parasect. And I want to put him into the S tier just for the lore alone, but I don't think I can do that. This creepy dude is as dead inside as any millennial that I've ever met, and actually has a halfway decent attack. It also has access to the move Spore. While this Pokemon isn't winning any contests, it at least has a few things that make it usable. Due to all of that, and the fact that it also kind of reminds me of the Flood from Halo, we'll go ahead and pop it into the C tier. Venonat. And this little bugger is so underappreciated and underused, though if I had to guess, that's likely due to the stats that it has. The stats are poor, but this Pokemon has a surprisingly large move variety between Grass, Poison, and Psychic moves all rolled into one. We'll be giving Venonat the C tier, and I will tell you why the moment we get to Venomoth. Venomoth. Now, this Pokemon has a special place in my heart because of a solo run that I did in Soul Silver. This was I want to say the first Gen 2 run I did, and this little bugger performed better than I could have hoped. The stats aren't the best, but again, it gets a huge variety of moves that can wreck a full team if given the right moveset, and due to that, we're going to go ahead and give him the B tier, even if it did take me over 150 attempts to beat Red. Diglett dig, Diglett dig. This little guy has great speed, but I believe the lowest HP stat next to Shedinja. It's got a decent access of powerful moves, if you can pop them off, which you should be able to given his speed. It was great when crits mattered off of base speed, but definitely went downhill after that. Overall, he is a cute little guy, and I think we'll give him the C tier this time around. Trio, and this guy didn't skip leg day. I mean, look at that speed! His attack has also been raised a decent bit as well. It's still obviously got the good moveset, but the design is something I'm not crazy about. It's just not that great to me, but I still want to put it into the B tier and try to get the chance out of my head. Meowth, that's right. This smart-talking Pokemon from the anime is definitely a fan favorite, but only for his attitude. When it comes to battle, the only thing even remotely passable is his speed and the move Payday, because you gotta get money. He gets a decent move pool, which is great, but his special and attack are too low to make too good of a use of it. However, while its stats are poor, both abilities it has are great. Pickup allows you to get random items, and Technician actually gives you a decent power boost. The abilities are the saving grace here, so we're putting him into the C tier. Persian, the right-hand kitty to Giovanni, and another one that was far better off before they adjusted the crit ratio. It's got a wild variety of moves, as do most normal types, but there isn't much else great about the little guy. It's just also not my favorite design. It's just a bigger cat, so he's also gonna go into the C tier. This Pokemon was probably one of the best Pokemon introduced into the anime. From the headaches to the vacant stare that matches mine when people try to explain anything remotely technical as a whole, its stats aren't great, but the fact that it can know a whole plethora of ice, psychic, and water moves is gonna land this guy into the B tier, and please get him some aspirin. Golduck. And you know the problem with Golduck is? It's typing. For the longest time, I thought this guy was a water psychic type, and it absolutely should be. The stats get a decent jump, and it still has the same wild, vast variety of movesets. The design is pretty cool, taking it from a dorky duck to a fierce-looking competitor. I'm placing this into the B tier and holding out hope that we will get a regional water psychic Golduck. Mankey, the wild donut Pokemon. This little pig-nosed goober is easily available by the optional rival fight, and that means that it's great when fighting against Brock. But that's about where his usefulness ends, except for Giovanni's rock and normal type. His stats aren't the best, but as a first form Mon, he has a decent attack stat, and he can learn a decent amount of fighting moves. Granted, most of them are garbage. He has a weird move variety, but I can't help but put this cute little guy into the B tier. A tier if he has Ash's hat. Primeape. This Angie boy gets a pretty good stat jump and has a pretty solid attack and speed. He is a bit of a glass cannon, but I guess that's a risk you gotta take sometimes. Once again, he's not super effective against many types, but he can still hit like a freight train given the right moveset. He has a lot of fun in the anime, and because of that, we're gonna go ahead and put him into the B tier, because I never said that I would not be biased. Growlithe, and here we see the goodest boy doing his absolute best. From a stats perspective, he's not great, but he does have a decent moveset. His design is pretty heckin' cute, and the fact that this line was almost a legendary prototype is pretty neat as well. The goodest boy deserves a B tier, and a few dozen head pats. Arcanine. Or Arcanine. It's a pretty fun Pokemon that pulls off an intimidating while demanding belly rub kind of design really well. It looks really good. The backstory of the Pokemon, like I said, almost becoming a legendary in the prior video is cool. The only downside of this particular Pokemon is the lack of usefulness it receives in a Nuzlocke after the 4th gym, and it's almost unusable after Gym 7. At the end of the day, A tier is fitting for this boy, though he does hold an S tier in my heart. Poliwag. Now this guy is absolutely adorable, and I would do almost anything for him. While the base stat isn't great, this dude can run with a speed of 90. The moveset is outrageous, being able to get Psychic, Water, and Ground moves with it. While it isn't the strongest, it does have plenty of gyms it can be strong against, and given the right move, can even stand up to Erica, so this little dude is getting a B tier, and as always, subscribe for more. Poliwhirl, the Pokemon that was featured so heavily in the manga, I believe it's actually the Protag's main Pokemon. I absolutely love Poliwhirl and wish that it was more popular, personally. The stats go up a decent bit, it still has the great move pool. The good news is, with water Pokemon like this, especially in Fire Red, they have a usefulness all the way to the end, and due to that, I'm giving him A tier, but I am super tempted to put him into S. Poliwrath. Now, what if we took this cute little guy, made him Angie, buff, and turned the swirl around? While the stat boost is nice and the fighting type is okay, I'm not big on the design. However, having fighting stab moves can now be useful in some situations, though most things you'll be going against, the water attacks will do just fine. I'll be giving him actually a B tier, just because for a Final Mon, his stats aren't great, and I don't like the final form all that much. Abra. And I'm gonna be honest, this is both tricky and not so tricky. The design is cute, but just like Magikarp, it has no way of actually fighting. So sorry, little guy, but you're actually going to be going into the D tier, but don't worry, because humble beginnings have strong payoffs. Kadabra. Now this is incredible. Strong special attack, strong psychic moves, and a really cool fox-like design. I don't know where the spoon came from, but he's the true definition of a glass cannon, but overall, he is an absolute monster in the early gens, and for that, he'll get a B tier and only get better as time marches on. Alakazam, and this is the first Pokemon that I believe we've covered that is a trait evolution, and I'm gonna be honest right away, he deserves S tier. He's fast, he's strong, He can't take a physical hit, but he likely won't need to. He's a great Pokemon. The one thing that brings him down is the fact that you needed to trade evolution to receive him. Nowadays, that's not a problem, but back in my day, we had to have a friend that was either willing to trade back, or you had to have 2 games, a link cable, and 2 Game Boys, and I'll let you decide which one I was while I go cry over my childhood. Machop, the muscular child dinosaur thing? Seriously, I don't know what those things on his head are. This design isn't too great, and showing the ribcage makes it a little concerning, but overall, it's a simple design that gets the point across. He has mediocre stats in a lot of ways, but his attack and HP are good for a first form Mon. He's also useful for people like Giovanni, some of Lorelai's team, and Bruno, some of them, so we'll go ahead and drop him into the C tier. Machoke. This is a Pokemon pretty underwhelming despite the stat increase. It becomes buff, and while the lore of taking off the belt gives you a monster like the Incredible Hulk, I'm not too crazy about the design overall. I'm pretty sure those red lines are actually veins or blood or something. I'm gonna go ahead and give it the B tier, but just barely. Machamp, the 4-arm Mortal Kombat looking fighting machine. The stat jump is great, the moveset is pretty alright despite a lack of fighting moves in Gen 1, and the design is really cool. 4 arms are better than 2, and I've seen enough attempts in from Crosschop to know that this guy deserves the A tier. Though I do kind of want to put him into the B tier just because of those attempts. Bellsprout. A cute little guy with halfway decent stats for being a first form Pokemon. This little guy had one episode in the anime where he wrecked everything and a lot of personality. He's found pretty early in the game, allowing him to take on Misty, Surge, Giovanni, and he can also resist Koga's poison types. Overall, not a bad Nuzlocke encounter with access to grass and poison moves, and I think C tier is a decent spot for the Wiggly Noodle. Weepinbell, the Pokemon that is extra suggestive, but overall not a bad design. Weepinbell isn't the strongest Pokemon, but it does get a small stat boost. There's nothing special to write home about, and it'll still get the C tier just due to how many gyms he can be used in, and Stoutist powders are always fantastic, but the real question you should be asking is, why did James have this? Victreebel, a mon that is probably bigger than it normally would be due to the popularity in the anime. You can technically get this in Celadon City, allowing you to use this against Erica if needed, and Giovanni. Lorelai is tricky given her ice moves, but there's a few you can send him against Bruno, but the only problem is the defense, special defense, and speed. If you can survive a hit, you'll be fine. This guy is getting an A tier because we love a Pokemon with personality. Tentacool, and this Pokemon is the Zubat of the ocean, with pretty lackluster stats except its special defense. Water Pokemon are pretty easily found, and it's unfortunate how late you get this mon. However, you do get it right before you can fight Blaine and Giovanni, and technically Lance, so it has some pretty good use to it. It's a fun design due to the lighting up aspect, so I think B tier is a good spot for this sushi Pokemon. Tentacruel, and let me tell you, this guy can take a hit. Thick special defense and a decent speed makes him a good threat. Like I said, he can learn Ice Beam so he can go up against Lance. He's getting an A tier, but if we could do something about this guy's nose, I would be happier, but it definitely makes him stand out and unique. Geodude, and this Pokemon, well, it's just bad. It's a rock with eyes and arms, and yeah, it has a decent physical defense and a subpar attack, but literally everything else is bad. It had a lot of time to shine in the anime, where it did definitely seem far better than it was. This guy is getting D tier though, and I have zero regrets. Graveler. Evolved from Geodude with some better stats and attack and defense, while everything else is kinda rough. This one is usable, but here's the problem. Misty, Erica, Sabrina, and depending on what moves Giovanni use, all can wreck this guy. The design is as rough as his body looks, and he's only getting a C tier because he can hit pretty hard. Golem, and this design I actually quite enjoy. I love the fact that he can become a ball if he wants. It's kind of like the Sonic the Hedgehog of rock Pokemons. The attack and defense are jacked, Rockhead and Sturdy are both pretty decent abilities, but the main problem is still the typing. We're gonna give him a B tier because he has a lot of positives, but the only problem is that with every positive he has, it also comes with a pretty big negative. Ponyta, and this is a pretty decent design. A horse on fire? Awesome. The shiny form? Even better. The speed is pretty good and the attack is decent as well. He has access to a good chunk of moves, but the main problem is how late you get this guy. You don't have access till the Burnt Mansion, he can't go against Giovanni, or Lorelei, half of Bruno's team, and part of Lance's, so he's getting a C tier, and frankly, it kind of makes me sad. Rapidash. Bigger horse, bigger fire, and a horn on its head to show that it's different. While I wish the design were a little bit more different from Ponyta, it's still pretty cool. The speed and the attack are both increased, which is good, but again, the only issue is availability and viability. Time to saddle up the C tier, boys, because you aren't getting past that. Slowpoke, and I adore this dopey little mon. I'm actually preparing to do a solo run the day of recording this with him. But he's cute, he's got a massive HP stat, and you can find him in Celadon City. He can go against Koga, Sabrina if needed, Blaine, Giovanni, Bruno, Agatha, at your own risk, Lance, and has access to some of the best psychic moves. All in all, B tier seems fitting, since he is a first stage mon. Slowbro. And talk about going from Super Saiyan to Super Saiyan 2, or Bankai, or whatever anime is popular today. Dude gets an insane jump in special stats and becomes an absolute, albeit slow-moving unit. Psychic types are always powerful, and I think it makes sense to give him the S tier, mostly from his award-winning smile. Magnemite, or Magnemite, depending on the meme that you're trying to go with. And you know what his problem is immediately off the bat? Not having Levitate as a potential ability. It's the only Steel type out of Gen 1 Pokemon, and Electric is hard to come by as well. You can get it after Surge, and it can take on Lorelei and a couple of Lance's Pokemon, but that's about it. Overall, I'll give him the C tier because he's not great, but he could absolutely be worse. Magneton. Now, what if we took that magnet and gave him 2 more? Magneton is a design I'm not crazy about, and I think Magnezone definitely saved the line. The stat boost is nice, the move pool is still decent, but seriously, why doesn't it get Levitate? C tier injustice for Magneton. Both. Farfetch'd, and him getting the S tier is also pretty far-fetched. The stats aren't great for a single-stage Pokemon, though you can get him in Vermilion City if you need cannon fodder. The moveset isn't great, but he does have a pretty good personality, especially in the anime. Unfortunately, he's going into the D tier because there isn't a lot that's great about him. Doduo, a cute little fluff ball who you can grab just outside Celadon City. From a stats perspective, it's not bad, but it can learn Tri-Attack, so that immediately makes him useful. It can also help with Erica if you need some super effective flying types, but unfortunately, that's the only place that he's going to be super effective. The stats are mid, but it's able to hit fast and hard, so I think C tier is a good place for it. Dodrio. And for me, who usually hates just an extra limb or an extra face, this one kind of works. It's still got the same shape, but it added an extra sassy head. The speed and the attack increase is enough to make him a possible threat to Sabrina, and at least neutral with Koga and Blaine. Overall, B tier is good, D ranking him 1 point for each head. Seal. And honestly, this guy's adorable, but kind of terrible. His stats aren't great, his moveset isn't the best, but he can be a thorn in the side of Blaine, Giovanni, 2 of Bruno's Mons, and Lance. Ice moves are great, and while they were certainly more powerful in Gen 1, I think B tier is a generous place to put him, only because you find him right when he's at his peak of usefulness. Dugong. And the Pokemon got some decent stat buffs, but honestly, it's still not enough. Again, he's a cute mon, and he can accomplish what water and ice types are meant for, but he's still not great. Even in solo runs, Dugong isn't the problem with Lorelei, it's every Pokemon past that. If you need someone to put out a fire or freeze some dragons, you'll good, but I think you'll be disappointed if you expect more. Grimer, and let's be honest, his design isn't winning any contests since the boy is just a pile of sludge. He can't be found until way late in the game and he's slow, but he has a pretty decent HP pool and a good attack. Overall, I think the C tier is rather kind, mostly because of the absolutely massive move pool that this man possesses. Muck. Yes, I know what Muck spelled backwards is. While the design is a bit better, but only because of the personality it received in the anime, its stats are what really make it shine. A big HP pool, a decent attack and defense, and a whole plethora of moves he can learn. This guy is gonna go into the B tier because there isn't much he was strong against. They did poison Dirty, and yes, that is kind of a pun, because at the end of the day, he's still a pile of Shelder, and up until doing this review, I didn't know that his defense was as boosted as it was. Sadly, that's the only amazing stat that he has. There are plenty of locations to find this guy, and you could use him to set up if you're going against a physical attacker like Bruno, and he can learn enough moves to be a thorn in the side of some special attackers, so he'll go into the C tier because he's not bad, but he's also not great. Cloyster, and look at that defense stat, and honestly, its special is the only stat that goes against it, but if you play smart, you should have no problem with this Mon. It doesn't have the best move pool, much like Shelder, but it can learn enough to get the job done. It looks cool, and totally not at all like... Anyway, B tier is where it's going and we're moving on. Ghastly. Decent speed, decent special, but the only problem with Ghost Mons is how few of them there are. Whether if it's the anime, Pokemon Stadium, or just in typical drawings, this dude has so much personality, and he did quite well on a solo run of mine, so B tier seems more than fair. Haunter, and this is actually my favorite design of the three, especially with the spectral hands, in Gen 3 specifically. The special attack and speed is great, and if you can land Hypnosis, you can wreck a team with Dream Eater. Curse can be good as a you can't fire me, I quit type of move, and overall, he's just really cool, so I'm going to be putting him in the A tier where he belongs comfortably. Gengar, and I'm fairly certain that if I didn't say S tier, I would be served divorce papers tomorrow. But Gengar has a killer design, an amazing special attack. My only real complaint is the ability changes from Levitate to Cursed Body. However, if you want to know about how I bought a rolling tray with Gengar on it, thinking that it was for D&D, but it most definitely wasn't, let me know in the comments. Onix. And do you want a Pokemon that has a decent speed, a crazy defense, but hits weaker than an Oddish? Then look no further. Onix is a cool design, truthfully, but the stats are just bad. Another problem is not being able to find this until halfway through the game, so Blaine is the next time that it might be useful. C tier is where he's going, and I'm honestly very much thankful for Steelix. Drowsy. A creepy Pokemon, but actually pretty tanky for a Psychic type. Psychic types are always going to be higher up in the tier list, given how busted they can be, especially in earlier generations. He's no different because while he is creepy, I kind of like the goofy little smile on the Pokemon Stadium minigame, and I think he can hang out in the B tier. Hypno. All the stats do a drastic increase, but he's no Alakazam. However, he's still pretty good. He can learn Shadow Ball, strong Psychic moves, and overall is a force to be reckoned with. A tier is where he is going to go, because again, he's no Alakazam. Krabby, a Pokemon made so popular from the anime because his stats aren't doing him any favors. While his attack and defense are good, everything else is kind of bad. The unfortunate thing is some of his physical attack moves also have horrible accuracy, so making use of them can be tricky. He can learn Guillotine, and he is cute, so I'm going to go ahead and place him into the C tier. Kingler. This one can take some hits and dish them back as well. While the other stats remain lackluster, the anime definitely makes me have a soft spot for this guy. He doesn't have the worst speed stat in the world, so you can absolutely use guillotine tricks. I think B tier is a good placement for this guy because he's a big crab. Voltorb, the angry Pokeball with a face. From a design perspective, it's simple, however, I like the lore and the ideas behind it. traps left to look like Pokeballs, and keeps you on edge. He can be found in a decent spot, learns some good electric moves, so I think C tier is an all but fair placement for him. Electrode. Now let's rotate the ball counterclockwise, turn that frown upside down, because the speed is absolutely insane, and while he'll be good for people like Lorelei and Lance, B tier seems like a decent enough spot for him, and that's only because he has such a charming smile. Execute. And this Pokemon is an odd design and also somewhat worrisome, given the fact that there's a random egg that's just open, but it also raises questions like an egg hatching to spawn even more eggs. Either way, stats aren't great, but it can learn some decent moves, having both grass and psychic typing. Its biggest issue is location. Safari Zone Mons are horrible to try and capture. If you do manage to capture one, you can run up to Sabrina, Giovanni, Lorelei, Bruno, and Agatha. B tier for the boy, and now I think I have to go make scrambled eggs. Executor, and when this guy evolves, he goes ham. All stats become pretty good except for speed, but he doesn't need it. He's got a great special attack and a pretty good regular attack, which isn't super common for psychic types. The design is pretty strong overall, and I think A tier is fitting given the fact that it can paralyze people and then set up a sweep if needed. Cubone, and this one is interesting. It got a lot of attention in the first game storylines given the rocket stuff that happened. It was a Pokemon that I did a solo run with, and it honestly wasn't bad. Cubone is odd because it's a ground type that can learn Ice Beam and Flamethrower, giving him a good chunk of versatility. He can also be found in Pokemon Tower, so while he isn't great against Erica, he can go against Koga, possibly Sabrina, Blaine, and Giovanni. We'll add him to B tier because honestly, he's pretty cool. Marowak, and this Pokemon has so many theories about it, people have made entire videos on it. The stats get a nice 100-point jump, and now it has even more power to back up its wide variety of moves. At the end of the day, the design is just slightly different to Cubone, making it have a clear distinction between mother and child, but I still think B tier is where I'm gonna go ahead and put this guy. Girl. Thing. Hitmonlee, based off Bruce Lee, I think. I don't know, it was on the internet, so it must be true. It's cool to see that they made these guys, and he's got a pretty good attack stat. He's also got the ability to set up with Meditate, and make sure he can hit ghosts with Foresight. Fighting Pokemon don't get much love, but I think he can go into the A tier, because you can get him right before Blaine and Giovanni, a couple of Lorelei's types, Brunos, and if he can hit ghosts, he can technically hit Agatha in the face. Hitmonchan, based off Jackie Chan, maybe. I love the little boxing gloves and the fact that he can learn the elemental punches, even though they're incredibly weak. Weak coverage is better than no coverage. He's gonna join Hitmonlee in the A tier given the fact that he has a decent design and plenty of use if given the right moves. Lickitung, and it's a bizarre design and there are so many memes about this guy. It's a single stage Pokemon, at first, and its stats are passable for that. It learns a crazy amount of moves because it's a normal type, so of course it does, but it's tanky enough to do a solo run. B tier is suitable, and it's good he got an evolution, no matter how poor the design actually is. Coughing. And after using this Pokemon in a dual run, it actually has my respect. Access to poison moves, Flamethrower, Thunderbolt, and overall decent stats. It also has Levitate, which makes powerful ground moves useless. And worst case scenario, he could just blow up. Coughing deserves a B tier even if he is just a little ball of gas. Wheezing. While this Pokemon is definitely popular due to the anime, it deserves it. It's a tanky mon with a plethora of moves, and it does a good job of showing off how disgusting it actually is. If this were the side effects listed in a DARE program, I probably would have listened better. A tier because its only downfall is how late in the game you actually get it. Rhyhorn. This is such a fun Pokemon, and you can tell a lot of love went into the design, especially given the fact that it was the first designed Pokemon. He can learn a bizarre set of moves, though his special is horrid. Unfortunately, he's another Safari Zone encounter, and a tough one at that. B tier is going into it, because if you do catch him, he can wreck some teams, just good luck doing so. Rhydon. Rhydon D's? Anyway. Rhydon is a cool Pokemon with outrageous HP, attack, and defense, but unfortunately a special made of paper mache. He's a hard hitter, and you can go against Blaine, Giovanni, and Agatha, and I think the A tier is a good spot for him. Just don't get hit by any special moves or you're gonna go down quick. Chansey. And this Pokemon is great. From the massive HP stat to the time to shine in the anime, this Pokemon is absolutely deserving of the S tier. While its physical is, well, horrid, it can at least take some hits from a special's perspective. It's good at stalling Pokemon with heal moves, and it can also drain others, but good luck catching it in the Safari Zone. Tangela, and I actually feel bad for this spaghetti monster. It's the only pure grass type in Gen 1. It's a single stage Pokemon, but it's mid at best. It has a decent physical defense and special, and that's it. You also can't get it until you get Surf right below Pallet Town, and the next gym is Fire type. Overall, you can use it for Giovanni, Lorelei if she isn't using ice moves, and 2 of Bruno's Mons. It's a C tier Mon, but I wish that it had more use. Kangaskhan. And this is a pretty solid Pokemon. The design is cool, the lore behind it is great, and people are still trying to figure out if it and Cubone are somehow related. Its move variety is insane, given the fact that, again, it's a normal type, and it's a hard hitter for sure. Giving the Mama Bear a baby tier, and I'm thankful her baby is ready to fight when the Mega Evo happens, because these hands are rated E for everyone. Horsey. And this Pokemon is average, the design is cute, and the stats are about what you'd expect. However, Sniper is a monster-sized ability, further doubling the power of critical hits. The level-up moveset is awful, but it can learn a decent set of TMs. There's plenty of gems that this little guy can shine, and even though it is mid, I'm still gonna give it the B tier. Seadra. And once again, it's a Pokemon that becomes Angie upon evolution. The stat jump is nice, and we all know that it has an even better evolution down the road. You can get it before the 7th gym, which is a huge help. I'll give him A tier because he came in clutch during my Water-type Nuzlocke with smokescreen strats and tanking some hits. Goldeen. And I think that we both know that this is going to go into the D tier right away. It's pretty horrible overall, especially knowing that Smash Bros, if your Pokeball releases a Goldeen, it just flops around. Its attack is okay. My best bet is avoid yourself some headache, catch it so you don't have to worry about it if you are going by Nuzlocke rules, and then box it forever. Seeking. And this Pokemon is a little bit better. It gets a stat jump, and like most water types, it does have a decent set of coverage. Hornbill is pretty great if you can land it, but overall, there's so many better water types that you can get from a stats perspective and a design perspective. This one will go into the C tier, however, but just barely. Staryu, and let's go ahead and address the elephant in the room. The design is bad. However, it's got a decent base stat total for a first form Mon. You can find it easily enough, and it's got a lot of really good moves that it can use. C tier for an average Pokemon, but as we've seen before, great things require a little bit of patience. Starmie, and this Pokemon, especially in early gens, is pretty amazing. It can access Psychic moves, Water moves, and for some reason, Thunderbolt. The design is a bit more than the first form in a good way, and I think A tier is fitting because you're a star. Mr. Mime. Okay, let's get this out of the way immediately. Creepy Mime vibes aside, it's a solid Psychic type. It can learn insanely powerful moves, as most Psychic types do, and it even got buffed further on, given a Fairy type in the later generations, so we're gonna go ahead, give it the A tier, and then move on. Scyther, a really cool Pokemon with a really cool design. Swords Dancing Scyther can absolutely sweep, and if you have Technician on top of that, it can be accessed by gambling, or if you're feeling extra lucky, you can catch it in the Safari Zone. It has decent moves, but sadly no good bug moves overall. I think it's still an A tier Pokemon, maybe B tier due to the lack of people he's strong against, but when you're that strong physically, I don't think it matters. Jinx, and problematic designs aside, it's not a bad Pokemon. It was definitely better in Red, Blue, Yellow than it is currently. The access to Psychic moves is good, while Ice definitely has some benefits. Lance. If you can pop off early enough, given the fact that it has a decent speed and one-shot everything, you'll be good. Otherwise, you might get knocked out quick. Either way, B tier is good as long as we ignore the design, and also, make sure to check out my solo run that I did with a Jinx. Electabuzz! And this one is a lot of fun with its yellow and black striped body. It can learn a wide access of electric moves, and static can always come in clutch if needed. It can only be caught in the power plant, which is a bit off the beaten path, but can be used against Lorelei and some of Lance's team. We'll place him into B tier, not because he's bad, but honestly because he's received so late. Magmar, the inventor of the duck face and a literal butthead. His defense is the only really bad stat, and he has some decent ones overall. Fire types can be good, but it's hard to get him. He's got some decent moves under his belt, but overall, you could complete the same thing with an Arcanine or Flareon with probably half the effort. C tier because I want to burn down Erika's gym, and I can't do that with him. Pinsir. And we have the same problem with him that we do Scyther. No bug moves, but all around pretty good stats and a cool design. With Swords Dance, a massive attack stat, and moves like Earthquake, he can be an absolute unit. Just don't get hit with a special attack. He can be bought just like Scyther or caught in the Safari Zone, and I think B tier is a good place for him. But where did the bug catcher in the anime find him? Tauros, a popular Pokemon, at least for Ash, and an absolute nightmare to go against in Red, Blue, Yellow. This hard-hitting creature can learn some absolutely devastating attacks, and has a decent enough special and physical defense to mow down most everything. It's a pain to catch because, again, it's the Safari Zone, but let's be honest, everything in there is awful. Tauros will be getting the A ranking, even if the design isn't the most striking, but I do like the tails. Magikarp, and let's be honest here, it's a D tier Pokemon, it can barely attack, it's basically useless, and even if you wanted to eat it, you can't. While he can learn Tackle and Flail, he doesn't have a good enough attack stat to actually back it up, but if you can train it long enough or switch train it, you will be rewarded. Gyarados, and is it any surprise that this will be getting the S tier? A fierce design, arguably one of the best abilities in the game with Intimidate, and access to plenty of physical attacking moves. My only wish is that it were a dragon, especially after dealing with Magikarp so long, but this is still a really cool Pokemon. I really want that dragon type, y'all. Lapras. This is a pretty tanky mon with a decent defense, better special, and a massive HP pool. Honestly, the ice typing brings it down, given how weak ice types are. I love the design perspective of it, looking at a little Loch Ness, and I think it's fitting of the A tier. Though one day, I'd love to see a new evolution or a baby form. Gigantamax just didn't do it for me. Ditto. And this one is a bit weird to try and place. Overall, if we're going off its own merits, it's kind of bad. It's a cool gimmick. It's great for breeding. I don't know if I could say that in a YouTube video. It's going into the D tier because while it can be anything, the original is always better. But I'm also going to go ahead and give it S through C as well because it can also be that. Eevee. And this cute little bugger was a nightmare to be able to do a solo challenge for. It's cute, it has a couple moves it can learn, but overall it's incredibly limited. It's a solid C tier Pokemon because, let's be honest here, how many of you get an Eevee and keep it that way because you want to? Vaporeon, and did you know that Vaporeon, no, we're not doing that. Vaporeon is gotten in enough time and with enough coins to learn Ice Beam that it can take on Erika, Blaine, Giovanni, Bruno Zonix, and most of Lance's team. It's got a ridiculous health stat. I've used it in Nuzlocke and solo runs, and I think it's a solid S tier Pokemon. Jolteon, a Pokemon with more spikes than Sonic the Hedgehog, and I guess Shadow the Hedgehog as well. In this game, electric types, and useful ones at that, are few and far between. He could technically help against Lorelei and Lance, but speaking from a solo run experience, he gets rocked by a lot of, well, rock and ground types. Either way, he still has access to some good moves, and B tier is a good place for it, though I would say Flareon is probably better. Flareon, and getting this Pokemon right before Erika immediately increases its usefulness, but that's about all it'll be useful for. The design is cute with a little floofy tail, and everyone remembers the Eevee Brothers episode, but overall, I'd probably try to get a Growlithe or an Arcanine rather than use Flareon. At the end of the day, if this is your only option in a Nuzlocke, then go for it. B tier is still solid, and that's where he's gonna go. Though he'll be above Jolteon. Porygon, the fun Pokemon with a banned episode, though admittedly it was Pikachu's fault. From a stats perspective, it's pretty mid. Just like any other normal type, though, it has a wide variety of moves, and I'm thankful for its later evolutions. It's a Pokemon that can be bought, and if trained well enough, it can be a menace with conversion. C tier seems appropriate given its stats, but we'll see how it does when I start the inevitable solo run with this guy. Omanyte, all hail Lord Helix. Shell armor is an ability, beefed up defense, and a pretty solid special attack make this guy really good. It has access to rock, normal, water, ice, and while it gets destroyed by Erica, you can get him right before Blaine, leading into Giovanni, Bruno, and Lance. B tier, though the power of Lord Helix does make me want to place him higher. Omastar, and we're really leading into this little Cthulhu, though personally, I don't like this design as much as the prior one. However, you get a 100 BST raise, and that definitely outweighs how I feel about the design. I used Omanyte in a solo run, so I know he's a beast, and Omastar is going to find himself in the A tier for this. Kabuto, and this was actually one of my first shiny Pokemon in Pokemon Go. On a stats perspective, it flips over to specializing more on attack rather than special, while still having a pretty good defense. The good news is it can learn plenty of physical moves and oddly enough some solid grass moves, and he performed well in the solo run, so he'll go along Omanyte in the B tier. Kabutops, and I love this design, and it kind of gives a prehistoric Scyther feeling. The attack is great, the defense is solid, and he still has access to good moves. A tier is where he'll sit as well, because the design is just so good. The moveset allows you to show off some interesting combos, both in solo runs and if you allow it Nuzlocks. Aerodactyl, and for a rock type, this dude has some ridiculous speed. The attack is great, and while the level up moveset isn't the best, it does at least still have access to decent moves by TM. The only issue is that the flying type gives it an extra weakness, and for that, B tier is where the prehistoric Pokemon is gonna go. Snorlax, and this is where my bias is gonna show because it's gonna be in the S tier immediately. Cute design, thick fat ability, but also pretty decent stats, with speed being the outlier. However, he has a ridiculous set of moves and combine Belly Drum, Leftovers, a strong physical attack, and you can sweep through. Admittedly, it's a slow sweep, but who can forget what he looks like as well when he does his Z move. Articuno, and this is another one I did a solo run with, and let's be honest, would you expect it to be anywhere but the S tier? Great stats, plenty of moves to take on Brock, Erica, Giovanni, Lance, and Bruno. Out of all of the legendary birds, especially for a solo Gen 1 run, this one's the best, it's top tier. The only issue is if you're going by standard Nuzlocke rules and you allow legendary birds, it's just found so late in the game. Zapdos, and while I don't think it's as good as Articuno, it's still deserving of the S tier. It has plenty of electric moves it can learn, and a crazy high special attack to make pretty good use of it. There's still plenty of gym leaders it can go toe-to-toe with, and is one of the few really good electric types. Moltres, and again, S tier. There isn't much to say that hasn't already been said. The design is great, stats, moveset, you know the drill by now. If you want to see how each of these legendary birds perform individually, make sure to check out my Pokemon videos where I beat Fire Red from the beginning with each one. Spoiler alert, we beat the game every time in record time. Dratini, and it feels weird being out of the S tier after 3 days of being there. It's a cute little noodle of a Pokemon, but the stats are bad. Attack is its best, and it isn't even that great. The level up moveset is okay, but it can learn a decent set of TMs. C tier is where this noodle belongs, but as always, if you have the patience, great things can come from waiting. Dragonair, and I love this design, and it's so or at least it seems, heavily inspired by Japanese dragons. Shed Skin is an alright enough ability, and the stats are slowly climbing up. Dragonair goes into the B tier because even with the higher stats, most dragons aren't viable until they hit their final evolution, and unfortunately, Dragonair is no different. Dragonite, and I think it's pretty obvious where this Goofy Goober is gonna go. While I wish they would have stuck with the Slender design, it's hard to imagine him any different now. He had a Lighthouse episode, which didn't really make sense now that we see that it's kind of small. But with a wide variety of moves, a busted attack, and Lance killed a man in Heart Gold, he's amazing if you stay patient enough to actually level it up, and in a Nuzlocke, manage to keep the first two forms alive. Mewtwo. And what can I say aside from S tier? He's a powerful psychic type, there's been multiple movies made about him, he can learn a wide variety of moves. I wish that he could be obtained before the post-game, but let's be honest, if we got him beforehand, he would probably be way too powerful. Maybe they could have given us his armor form as a way to counteract that, but he's still an incredible Pokemon. I just want to be able to use him more, that's all. Mew. And this is another one that goes into the S tier, although I can't decide if I like it more or less than Mewtwo. From a stats perspective, it's worse. However, from a TM perspective, it can learn literally everything. But I guess at the end of the day, once you're in the S tier, placement doesn't really matter all that much. Alright, so far we've reviewed Electro, Diglett, Nidoran, Mankey, Venusaur, Rattata, Fearow, Pidgey, Seeking, Jolteon, Dragonite, Ghastly, Ponyta, Vaporeon, Poliwrath, Butterfree. We are going to keep going through all of the different gens, so thank you so much for the support. If you're new here, I'm Brickerboom. I'm going through every single Pokemon. If you have been sticking around for a while, thank you. Starting tomorrow, or Friday, or Monday, whatever, whenever this is posted, we'll start with Gen 2 Chikorita. So in setting all of this up, I realized there are 4 Pokemon that I missed. Sandshrew, Sandslash, Zubat, and Golbat. I remember recording them, but apparently between recording them, uploading them, scheduling everything properly, they got lost in the shuffle, so for the first time and the only place that you're going to be able to find them, we're going to go ahead and rapid fire cover those real quick. Sandshrew, a pretty cute mon with some pretty decent stats, except for, special attack like most ground types. I have a soft spot for this boy since it was the first Pokemon plush that I ever owned, but even that isn't going to save it from the C tier because there's just too many things that it goes against in Fire Red that it's unfortunately weak against. Sandslash, and it looks even cooler! Or at the very least pointier. Pointier? Anyway. The stats get a nice increase, especially both the attack and defense. It's a good boost, it's a solid mon. The only main issue I think that you're going to run into is, again, there isn't much that you're able to use it for throughout the entirety of the game. Once you get to Blaine and Giovanni, and to Bruno's Pokemon, you can probably set up a pretty decent strategy, but overall, I'm gonna put it into C tier because it's not the most useful mon, and it makes me sad. Zubat. Decent design, but a very annoying Pokemon, especially from a first-time player perspective. It's definitely a C tier mon because it does have access to pretty decent moves, and it does get some usefulness, and not only that, both Poison and Flying type are considered very useful. Overall, it is a fun Pokemon, it's just so annoying for the first time. Golbat, a surprisingly fast Pokemon for something that, well, I can't imagine that an open mouth gives you much aerodynamicity. That seems like a word. Either way, I think this Pokemon is going to go into the B tier because it does get a nice little stat boost. I still like the design quite a bit, and by the time that it evolves, there are plenty of Pokemon that it can actually go up against. It's fast enough to be able to hit some of the quicker Pokemon that you may not be thinking of. Overall, pretty solid encounter, and it just gets better with time.